Welcome back to the channel, guys, and in this video we're going to be looking at this. Yes, we've got the ECU back from Blue Hawk Electronics, and here are some pictures of that ECU. And for those eagle-eyed viewers who watched the first video on this car dismantling it, you'll note that the part number on this ECU is different to the one that we had previously. The pinout is the same and they are completely cross-compatible, but unfortunately the original ECU was too far gone. The wires on the circuit board which connect the internal layers had rusted and damaged internally, which made that circuit board unfortunately irreparable. So we've got a new ECU, and what we've done is we've gone ahead and cloned the data from the original ECU into this one, and it's now completely ready to go back into the car. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we still need to do on today's video is to get all this nasty cobwebs and all this crud out. We need to refit this that we've cleaned back into here, and we need to get all of this area at the back cleaned out of all of this nasty debris so that we can start thinking about putting this ECU back in the car. How are we going to do that? Well, good old-fashioned elbow grease. I've got a little brush here. We'll brush some of the stuff out, and I've got some rags. I'm just going to get my hands in there and give it a good clean. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how it looks once we've done it. Okay, so we've gone ahead and given that a bit of a clean out, a bit of a brush, and it's like that now all the way across the back end of that bulkhead to get rid of all of the mess that we can. And what we need to do now is go ahead and reintroduce the drain. Now, some people say just to leave this out. Some might say to cut this slit to make it wider. The issue with cutting the slit to make it wider is you allow then extra moisture to come back up underneath here. You're going to allow potential rodents to get in as well where the wiring is. So I recommend leaving it as it is, and we're just going to refit that back in. Now, it literally just seats into that hole there. Okay, so you pop it in, give it a little push down like this, and that's it. That's all seated back where it should go, and the water would ordinarily drain underneath the back of this here down to where your heater hoses are, which go inside the car. Okay, so that's where the water would normally drain from. What you do in order to clean that out properly, need to remove all of that scuttle panel so you can get that out and clean it. Okay, that's that job done. So I'm going to go ahead now and refit the battery so that we can then think about putting power onto the ECU, and we can go ahead then coming back across here, and we can get some fuel bled back into that fuel filter, and then we can at least give the engine a turn over and see if it'll fire up. So I've gone ahead now and just lifted the battery in. This is your clamp down bolt. So what we need to do in order to secure the battery is make sure that it's all the way towards this way when we fit it, and all the way backwards that way. And then we just need to go and tighten this down with a 13mm socket and an extension and a ratchet. So I'll go ahead and tighten that down, and then we'll look at refitting the battery terminals. This is here, which is connected to this distribution block. That will just sit over the top onto there and push down, and the negative terminal here will just go onto here and tighten down afterwards. But the first thing we're going to do is tighten this down with our 13mm. Okay, so top tip for you: if you hold the ratchet with one hand over the head of the extension bar like we see here, and you turn it, this will ensure that you don't actually over tighten this bolt. If you hold it at the end with two hands, one at the front and one at the end there, you'll get so much leverage that what will happen is potentially you can over tighten this, and what will happen is you could strip the threads inside, which means you won't be able to hold your battery down tight, or you might actually snap the bolt altogether. So just do it with one hand and then a little nip like that, and that's that done. Just give it a little tug as we see here, and we now know that battery is secure, and no matter what happens, it's not going to go anywhere in the future. And the first battery terminal I'm going to fit is going to be the positive. Now we do have these here which need to go down the side of the battery. There's one there, and there should be two on this side, and we can see one's already broken off on this particular setup. So I'm just going to gently place that battery terminal in position over the top of the positive, and I'm just pushing that down there. Just give that a little bit of a tap if I need to with a mallet. We can see that these stays are just in position on each side. I'm just going to get something to tap this down. So I'm just going to get something on here and use a mallet and just tap that down gently so that that's fully on here. And then we're going to go ahead with this 10mm and just nip that up. So all I've got is a small extension. I'm just going to go onto here and I'm going to take, if I can just get this on here. I'm just going to take this mallet, just give a gentle tap on there. I'm going to do this off camera because I need 2 hands. Just tap it down and we're just trying to get that terminal to sit nice and flush. And with 3 very gentle taps, you can see that's fully seated now on there. And I'm just going to go ahead now and tighten that up with a 10mm. And again, when doing these, I'm just going back to using my hand on there. No need to over tighten it. Just nipping that up so that it's making a good contact. With one hand is plenty. So that's nipped up. I can just give it a little twist, a little check, and that battery terminal now is fully tightened down as it should be, how we want it. Now there would ordinarily be a plastic cover that goes on here, but again on this particular car, as with so many of its age, that cover's broken. But what we can do is just put that cover back over the top when we're done, and that will cover and protect that terminal. And the next terminal we're going to fit on here will be the negative, so I'm just going to bring that across, and this is now going to put power back onto the car. So if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure that all of my other cables are secure in a way so they're not going to short. Now on this car, I've actually, if I go around here and show you, if you look down here, you might see that I've removed the alternator, which would ordinarily sit down at the back there. Now because the alternator's removed, that means the main power cable's removed as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that cable's got something covering it before I connect the battery, because if I connect the battery now and that main power cable touches any part of the car that's metal, we'll get a big spark and potentially blow fuses and cause other damage. So I'll go ahead and make sure that's covered, then we'll connect that terminal. Okay, so you can't really see the wire itself, but you can see I've covered that in one of these yellow rags that I've got down there, and that's protecting that particular terminal from shorting to the car. So I can now come back over here and we can put the negative terminal back to the car, and that one's gone down okay, so no need to tap it down. So I'll go ahead, get the ratchet around here, and I'll just nip this one up. Again, just using one hand, no real pressure needed. And again, this has got a little bit of grease on it to prevent any kind of shorting in the future or any extra corrosion on the terminal itself. Just do this little wobble left and right, little pressure left and right. We know that's nipped up and that's done. So now with power back on and the battery connected and firmly bolted down, we can go ahead and reintroduce the engine control unit and make sure that that's going to fire the engine over. So some of you out there might say, Steve, what are you doing? Well, what I need to make sure is we've cloned the old code from the old ECU, which we couldn't repair, to this new unit. And it's worth mentioning that this particular unit is a slightly different part number, if I get that to focus. Now you'll see that this one is a 55198930CN unit, which is a different part number, but they are interchangeable as long as it is for the DTJ unit. And you can see it says Z13DTJ. So we were able to actually clone the code directly from the old unit to this one, so it should be plug and play. So just to make sure that's going to work okay, what we're going to do is connect the ECU back up now. I've just pushed this connector inside, and we're just going to firmly move this lever across, and you'll see this go in at the end as I do that, and that will snap that into the ECU. And now I need to just get the other connector, which is hiding underneath it here. And I just need to get this one into there as well. So I'll go ahead and do that off camera in the same way, and that will just put power to the ECU just for the purpose of priming the fuel into here. Okay, so I'll go ahead, I'll reconnect that, and then we'll go ahead and prime the fuel system through. We now have the ECU fully connected with both connectors, and both of these tabs fully back here and here, and we can actually just lock that one in there as well if we need to by pushing that yellow tab in there. So the next thing we need to do is to take a 12mm open ender or ring or socket onto this here. We just need to slacken off this bleed valve here, which I've already done, So I can turn that now by hand in here. You see that turning? There. Now, we can put some tube on this if we want to drain it, be careful, but for the purpose of just priming it, I'm not too fussed. What I'm going to do now is go and turn the ignition on with the key, and we should start here, fuel being primed for 2 or 3 seconds, and it will slowly fill that fuel filter up until fuel comes out of the top. When it does that, I can then nip that valve back up here with the 12mm, and we should have pressure in the lines. At that point, we should be able to turn the engine over. So I'll go ahead now and prime the fuel system. All right, so all I'm going to do is turn the key and put the ignition on, as you'll see there. And what we should do is hear a relay click, providing there's power to it from the new ECU, and that should slowly start to prime fuel through using the electric fuel pump. So let's go ahead and do that. Ignition on. That's priming for a few seconds, and each time we do that, it's going to be pumping fuel, hopefully, into here. So I'm going to go ahead and keep priming that for a few seconds, and hopefully we'll see some fuel eventually coming out of the top, which will show us that we've got fuel in that fuel filter. Okay, so it took me quite a few times of priming the system, but I did actually get a little bit of dribble out of the top there, so I've nipped that back up. What I'm going to do now is just turn the key to the ignition point, hold it there while it primes one last time, and then we'll try and start the engine. Okay, so we have prime. I can hear the fuel pump pumping fuel, and let's turn the key and see if we have a success. Fantastic. So we can now see this engine is now running. You can hear it. So we know that ECU has been cloned well, and we also have the engine running on all 4 cylinders. So we have the engine switched off. So we've proven that the ECU is going to work, so we can now go ahead and fit it properly. We can start to rebuild all of this scuttle panel area. We know that we've got a good prime on here. We've got no leaks at all through that new fuel filter. None at the top, none at the bottom. We can also check to see that the leak off valve that we fitted here is not leaking anywhere across any of the injectors, which is good. We have no leaks anywhere. Okay guys, so as you've just seen in the video, we've got the car running. It's time to start the rebuild process, but before we do that, as any good mechanic will tell you, it's time to have a brew. So let's enjoy the coffee, then we'll get back to doing a bit more on this. Okay, so first of all, let's just take a look at some of the tools we're going to need. We're going to, of course, need a jack, because we're going to have to lift the car up in the air. So we have a jack and a handle here for raising the jack. We're going to use a breaker bar here, and that's going to be for getting the wheel nuts off. We must have wheel chocks, and that's to secure the car. And in order to take the wheel off, of course, we're going to need wheel nuts, and they're in this box here. And in here we have a selection of different size wheel nut removers, sockets. So we need to find the right one for the car. And if we're going to go ahead and do the alternator, which we are today, and you can see one there which has been removed already, we're also going to need this. This is a T25. We're going to need a ring spanner, a 13mm. We're going to need a 10mm socket, and we're also going to need this tool, which is a fan belt tensioner tool. Okay, let's make a start. So we've gone ahead and slackened all 4 wheel nuts, we've chopped the rear wheels, we've jacked it up in a suitable place, we've got a couple of wheel nuts left to take out, and then we can remove the wheel from the car. We've chosen a suitable place here underneath on the chassis rail here to be able to jack the car up, and that's because we're going to be putting the axle stand under here on this part. Okay, that's where the axle stand will go to secure the car. So let's go ahead now and remove the wheel. And with the wheel removed, we can now go ahead and have a look at the brake disc itself and look for any damage there, any cracking or lips around the edge. We can look at our brake pads and check we have enough wear left on those, and we do. We can also have a good look at the track rod end and its boot to make sure that the boot's not leaking. We have the anti-roll bar links there, we can check those and their boots, we can give it a little tug. make sure there's no play, make sure there's no play in the track rod ends. We can also go in and look at the gaiters on the drive shaft on the outer side there. We can also check the brake pipes as we're looking around. Can't quite see the inside gaiter on the drive shaft, but we can on the steering rack there, so that's okay. We can check those boots there on the lower wishbone, or the lower arm as it may be known. And looking now at the spring looks to be okay and not broken. But we can see on the shock absorber there may be some leakage there, so we could be looking at replacing these front struts at some point in the future. And of course now checking the brake lines themselves for any cracking or kinks in there or any signs of leakage. All looks good in here, so let's get on with the rest of the jobs. So we have the axle stand underneath the chassis rail, underneath there. We have the jack also supporting. We're now good to go under the car in safety. In order to remove the alternator, we also need to remove this panel here with 1, 2, and there would normally be a clip here as well. And there would ordinarily be one holding it here underneath. But this one here is broken, and so is this one. So we just need to remove these two here and here, and that's your T25. So we take our T25 and we just put it in here and undo this one all the way. This one had a washer here. Put that to one side. Go ahead now and undo this one, and what we'll see is as this one undoes, that whole plastic tray, which is a splash guard for the bottom of the engine on this side where your alternator and your fan belt and everything is, that's out. And put that to one side, and this whole plastic tray can be removed. Okay, and as you can see now, we've got much better access into the whole of this area, and you can see this pulley here is your tensioner, and we're going to have to remove that tensioner in order to take the fan belt off. It's already been removed on this car, but we do need to make sure we know the routing for that belt as well. And the alternator's already been removed as well, but I will show you later how we adjust the tension using our tensioning tool. So you can see here we still have the jack connected to the car. We've lowered it down slightly so it's resting on top of the axle stand, and so we don't trip over it, and it's also a safe place for the wheel to be should either of those two devices fail. We put the wheel under the car as well. Well, let's take a moment to look at the faulty alternator. First thing I notice is that this should actually have a plastic cover on it here to protect these teeth from corrosion that you can see inside. So if we did need to remove this and rebuild it, you'd need to take that pulley off, and if that's all corroded, that's not going to be very helpful. So it's missing its plastic cover. We can see that it bolts on in this orientation in the car, this being the top, these at the bottom, and the way it would go in is these bolts, these Torx bolts, go through like this, and then you just tighten them up. But you'll notice the hole size on this one is bigger than this one and this one. Okay, I don't know if you can tell on the video, hopefully you can, but they are definitely got a lot of play in that, whereas in these there's very little play. And the reason for that, this one has actually got a bit more play, and that's because it's designed for these sleeves here, and there's one there and there's one that goes into this hole on this side, on the engine side, and they're locating sleeves. So when you offer this into the car, you can push it up in and they'll locate and hold. Okay. Now this alternator is faulty because it's actually overcharging, but what we also found with it was that it was, although it fits to the engine, it's got the wrong electrical connectors on the back. On the back of this one, you've got, this is your main power feed in here on a 13mm nut, and on this one you've got two connectors, one here and one here, which would have had the two wires going to it. Now on our car, on this engine in a Corsa, this is actually comes out on the top of the alternator up here on a plug, on a 2-pin plug. So this wiring had been bodged on the car to fit this alternator, which I suspect is off a different car that uses the same engine. So what we've done, we've got the correct plug, we've rewired that so that we've now ordered the correct alternator, and I'll show you what that looks like now. Okay, so the new alternator's here, and I'm just going to take a moment to compare the two. Now you'll notice, like I said, this one has no cover, but the new one does actually have that cover on. Got the holes in the same place, here and here, and at the top as well. And if we turn this one over, we can see that this one has the dowel, and we have a hole big enough here for a dowel, but no dowel in it, so we're going to need to try and tap out or remove this dowel from here and move it over to here. Okay, and looking at the back, we can see 13mm on each side, but this particular unit has the correct plug on the top here for our two wires, whereas this one actually has the terminals here and here, so they are totally different units, although they're in the same casting. So let's go ahead now and remove this dowel. And I've removed that dowel and placed it into the new alternator, and we've just put the alternator in through the wheel well area and placed it against the engine with a bolt in there, just a couple of turns, and I'll show you now what it looks like from the underside of the engine. So here you can see we've got one bolt going through already here, and again that's just started the thread, and we'll just go ahead and nip those two up and put the third bolt in there, and that will be the alternator in place. We'll go ahead and tighten those up now. And here, just to show you, we've used the flat ratchet. I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit there so you can see it better. On there, and you've got enough room there to be able to put some twist on, and that's how we tightened up the top one, obviously with the scuttle panel removed. And that's the top bolt tightened. Let's go ahead and do the bottom one now. Okay, so putting the ratchet in, we can just go ahead now and tighten this one up. It's a little bit awkward to get to. Of course, if you've got an electric ratchet or an air ratchet, it's a lot easier. Doing it with a hand ratchet is the way that most people will end up doing this at home. So I'll show you how to do it with that. And again, just using the socket, no extension on there, to nip this one up. A little bit awkward holding the camera with one hand and doing it, but we'll use two hands once we finish filming this, just to make sure they are tight for all three. That's number two. So I'll go ahead and put the third one in, and then just make sure they're fully tight. Then we'll go ahead and fit the fan belt. And now that is the new alternator fully fitted as far as bolting to the engine block and its bracket goes. But of course we still have the electrical connectors to fit. So I can zoom in down here. That's your main power that goes onto the back of the alternator. So that needs to be done by feel. You won't be able to actually see what you're doing here. Just slide it over that thread that was sticking out the back of the alternator, and then we'll put that nut on. So I'll do that now. Okay, so we've slotted that main power feed on there. We'll just put the 13mm nut on by finger. We're going to nip that up by finger now, and then just put a socket on there and just nip it up with the ratchet and the socket. And just looking from the underside of the car now, you can see that's all tight on the back of the alternator, that 13mm. So we can go ahead now and put the electrical connector onto the top. Okay guys, and we can now see that the electrical connector, I'm just showing you there, is now plugged into the top of the alternator as well. So that's the alternator fully wired up. We just now need to put the fan belt back on. Okay guys, just to show you the orientation of the belt, you can see it's going around the alternator, then coming across the top, and then it goes all the way around the back, over that pulley, across the crank pulley, and it goes around the tensioner, across the top of the tensioner there, and we can see the tensioner there with the nut in the middle. So we're going to go ahead now, put a 13mm on there, and we're going to use that tensioner to allow us to be able to get this belt easily over the bottom crank. I just said it was a 13, it's actually a 15, but all we're going to do is put this onto the nut up here, which I'm going to try and do while I'm holding this.
and then I'm going to rotate that forwards. As I do that, that slackens the belt, and now I can just gently ease that belt back over the pulley. Trying to do it while holding the camera, it's a little bit awkward. There we go. So you can see that's on. And then as long as that belt is fully seated, and I'm just double checking they are, I can release the tension, and that would be it. Now unfortunately, because I'm holding the camera, if you can see, that's not quite seated, so I'm going to go off camera and I'm just going to push that belt in there and seat it correctly, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, so I've now got that seated properly there on the pulley. I'm trying to put some light in so you can see. So it's on the tensioner correctly. It's sitting up there, the V-belt on the alternator. It's going across the top pulley. It's coming down here onto this pulley right here. And it's going onto the crank pulley as well. That's your AC compressor, by the way, in case you're wondering up there. So that's it, that's the fan belt reinstalled. So that's job done. We now need to come out and we need to start putting all of the plastic cover back on here and here. So remember, top tip, always put your bolts back in if you're going to be away from the car for any length of time, so you don't lose them and you remember what bolt goes where. So let's go ahead and put that plastic cover back on now and get the wheel back on. And with the cover now fully fitted with the 2 bolts at the top, there would normally be one down here as well which holds it to the inner plastic arch. Now because that's missing, I'm actually going to go ahead and zip tie that back together in a few minutes and hold that one on. But there should also be on your car another one here that's holding it on, but again on this car it's broken, so I'm going to go ahead and put a hole in there and zip tie it up so it's nice and tight. So I'll go ahead and do that on this car, but on your car you should just normally need to use that T25 and just tighten those 2 back up again. Okay, so we've got our lovely shiny ECU back from Dennis at Blue Hawk, and we have this filthy cradle, if you remember, the ECU sits in. Now it'd be a real shame to put that ECU back in here with all of this mess here, so I'm going to give you a top tip on how to clean this up very quickly. We're going to use an oil like this, a spray oil. WD-40 is the one people recognise. This is just as good, and we're just going to give it a really good spray in there, wet it all. That's going to loosen up all of the crud that we've got, and then just going to go ahead and give it a good wipe with a cloth. Okay, so we've cleaned up the cradle here, and we've got the seal which is going to sit in here, and all we need to do now is take your ECU, place it through the front so it's sealing around there, push it forward, and at the back here we just need to bring this clip up and over the back, and hear that nice satisfying click, and it's just located in here. Okay guys, so small correction, when you put this ECU back in here, these plastic trims actually sit on top of the ECU here, not underneath it, and obviously then it's still going to lock on the back of the ECU with that clip that we showed earlier, but it actually sits on top like this, and then your seal will seal properly all the way around, no need for any silicone or anything else. So let's go ahead now, fit this back to the car. Okay, so in order to fit this ECU, we've undone an 8mm here which secures this big harness down. That allows this harness to pick up and rotate out of the way completely, making it much easier to get the plastic tray in. Then what we did is we located the rear right here onto its stud, and then tilted the ECU upwards so that this little noggin here would fit underneath the back of the bulkhead of the car, and then gently tilted it back down so that it would go over this thread. And of course the front threads here, they line up quite easily then. So I'm just going to go ahead, get these 8mm nuts and put them onto the threads just to start them with my fingertips, just a couple of turns. I'll do that on all 4. One at the back here, and then the final one, I'll get you to see on the front here. To go on square, not any cross threads at this stage. There we we go. It's gone on nicely. That one's nicely on. And that one is, and that one is. So we'll go ahead now and get the 8mm ratchet and we'll tighten all of those down. So it turns out actually you're best off leaving this nut off here so you can lift the harness higher, and then you can actually get that in there on the groove, and then you can actually just push it straight down and it will fully seat in position on both sides, and then you can go ahead and put that nut back on. So again, I'm just using that same stubby ratchet and deep 8mm socket in here just to tighten that down. That'll clamp that wire back in position. Because there's only one on this, we can do it a little nip and then about a quarter of a turn on the ratchet just to hold it. The next thing we need to do is actually plug the ECU in. Before we do anything else about putting this scuttle panel back together, let's just go ahead and make sure the engine will start. So again, we're going to put the right one in first. So if I get these two connectors into position for us, like this, I'll push, give it a firm push in, and then just put your finger on this piece here and just rotate that. You'll see that go in with the finger at the back, and that locks down. Nice firm clip. Okay, and then other one for this side, and it is actually missing. This yellow clip here is what secures this to stop it coming down. It's missing it on the other one there, but it's not a big issue. So we just need to make sure that's fully open, and we try and get this one to go into the ECU. Don't force this because we don't want to bend any pins. There we go, that wasn't fully open, so I've just pulled it back a bit further and it's slotted on nice and easily. So again, finger on there, give it a gentle push as we pull that lever across. And when we're happy it's running and this is done for the final time, we'll just push this yellow clip in and it will stop this from opening accidentally. The yellow clip is missing off this one, but I don't see that coming undone anyway. So it's bolt and braces really this. It's not the end of the world if you don't have them on yours or if you lose them when you're doing it.
Let's go ahead now and tidy up the wiring at the back of the ECU. This little clip I'm pointing to actually needs to be rotated 180 degrees so it's facing towards the bottom of the wiring harness. And the stud that's sticking off the back of the bulkhead, we just give that a little push over there. You'll hear a satisfying click. Let's do that now. Give it a little push, and that's holding that there up and away from any water that might sit at the bottom there. And as we move across to the left, we'll see there is another zip tie which would normally hold this down, and we're going to need to pull that old one out because it's been cut and replace that, and we'll do that a little bit later. So that holds the wiring harness in its correct position. Now as you can see, I've gone ahead and removed that using a pair of pliers. I've just pulled that out of the hole, and you could leave that as a drain hole as an extra one to go with the one to the left there, the main one, which is for drainage. But I have the correct clip, so I'm going to go ahead and replace that with a new clip.
I just want to show you on each side at the end of the scuttle panel there is another drain hole. You can see that one there, and if we come back across this side you'll see this one here. Okay, so we do have now one there, we have a little one that we've created here, we have the main drain where it should all go out anyway here, and of course we've got one on the other side. So really we shouldn't have a water problem with this in the future, but it's certainly worth checking on your car that those holes are clear. Okay then guys, so I've gone ahead now and reconnected the battery. I actually found a zip tie for this that goes in through the bottom like the original did, so I've actually gone ahead and replaced that to keep it as OEM as possible. The alternator is now fitted down there and it's all wired up. We've got the fuel, we know that's all good, we know the leak valve, drain pipes are okay over here. So let's go ahead one more time, start the engine. I think we can all say that's a resounding success. It's definitely a thumbs up from me, so why not get a thumbs up from you? Please go down, give this video a like, and of course while you're there, go ahead and subscribe. It's completely free and it doesn't cost you a penny, but it will help me bring more videos like this for you, tutorials and helpful videos. Leave any comments you've got down in the comment section, and let's go ahead and rebuild the rest of the car and get this job finished. So the first thing that I've done is I've put the engine cover back on to protect the engine, so while I'm leaning over the engine there's no way I can catch anything or damage anything or drop anything in there. I've placed the scuttle panel back in across the back here. We do have this to repair, of course, when it goes back in, with a little bit of glue or silicone or something to hold that. And it's now time to go ahead and nip up all these 8mm across the top. So we'll start here, we'll work our way across all of the 8mm across the back here. And with all of those bolts back in, and we've got that one there, we've got one here, one down the back in there. Coming across here, we've got one here, and we've got one there. So with all of those in, if you want to go and give this a clean using your oil like we did earlier on the other plastic trim, you can do. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is to glue this back down onto here, and then we're going to cover it all over with this. Now to put this on, you have to put it kind of through one end here and over the top of the wiper arm, and then you are going to have to flex slightly this side to get these edges to go past the hinge. Obviously, before we do that, we also need to reattach the water pipe to the underside of this panel. Remember, we've got the T-piece there, joining piece, so we need to attach that water pipe or we'll have no water jets. Okay, so we've gone ahead and done the repair on the centerpiece here, and we haven't got enough plastic welding parts to finish this repair here, so I'm going to put it back together for now, and I'll come back to this at a later date. I won't leave it though, because that will allow extra water to roll under where the ECU is, so we will be doing that. What we've done then, we've fitted the scuttle panel over the top of the two wiper arms, and we flexed it on one end as we said, but now what we have to do is we have to try and get this edge to seat with the windscreen like we did before. Look on the windscreen seal, you can see the channel. I'm going to try and point to it for you. Just here, this channel. And this has got a lip on it, this actual, the bottom. I'll get that to show. There's a little lip there. So we have to literally just line it up onto the screen and then give a little push down, and that will seat. So we just got to get it all lined up and then push it down, and that will seat into the windscreen. Don't be overly heavy with this because we don't want to actually crack the screen. Okay guys, so I'm just going to show you exactly how that goes. I pushed it in most of the way already, but literally once you've got it lined up in the channel, a little push all the way along, and that will seat back in there all the way. And that is the top part of your scuttle panel done. What I'm going to do is just run my hand all the way across here with gentle pressure, just to make sure that's pushed firmly all the way back down. Now with that done, we do need to go ahead and just screw this down here, but I actually don't have those screws to hand at the moment. I'm not sure where they've gone. Here's me telling you top tips to put them where they go, and I've gone and lost the screws, so I may need to find some new ones. But we're going to go ahead now and put these wiper arms back on. Remembering the longer one goes on the left hand side, and making sure when we place it on the screen we have the blade somewhere as you see it here, and then when we come to the arm we can just give that a little push, so we've got the thread coming through, and now we can go ahead and put the 13mm nut on there. And with that on there we can put the ring spanner on, again 50-50 chance, and I've got it the wrong way. And I do like these knuckle ones. As you can see, you can actually get that on there with a little bend, and it makes it a little bit easier for you to tighten this down. Again, we're just going to nip this up, put my finger on the top because it helps with the ratcheting. Just going to nip it up, and it'll bite on the spline shaft of the wiper mechanism. Until you feel a little bit of resistance and maybe 1/8 of a turn, just to tighten that up. Now go ahead and do the same with the other side. So this is your smaller blade of the two. It's going to place that loosely on top there. Look across and make sure that the blade is sitting where I want it to sit. Just there. And then again, a little push. So that's got the thread sticking through. I can go ahead, introduce the nut, screw that down finger tight, and come back with the ratchet, and nip that one up. Now sometimes when doing this you can find that they actually slip on the splines before they've bit, and when you fully tighten them you look across and you find that the blades have moved. If they move just slightly, you can try and reset it by just lifting them up, placing them back down, but that should be okay on this one. But if your blades moved, you may need to just undo those and then reseat them a second time. All we need to do now is put the plastic cap back over both of the nuts. And here are those plastic caps. We just place them over the nut in any place where they sit, give them a firm push, and that holds that on. And go ahead again on this one, you can see it's just a round empty space. It'll bite on the nut itself as you push it down, and that's your wipers back together. And that, apart from the repair that we still need to do here, which will be another day now, and a couple of screws which I'll go and find to hold the scuttle down at the top, is almost the job done. Does anybody remember what I've missed? If you do, go down there, leave it in the comments. Yeah, you got it guys. We need to make sure we've put the seal back on. And if you remember right at the beginning of the video, when we took this apart, there's an actual channel here that sits inside, or this actual lip here sits inside that channel. So I'm going to go ahead now. It is shaped. You'll see there's a little bit of a curve here, so we know it starts at this end. I'm going to go ahead with a gentle push down into that cavity. That seal will sit across there all the way, and that will seal against the hood when it's on. And that is the job done. So the seal's now fitted all the way across from this edge, nice and neatly, all the way across the top of the scuttle panel there, and creating a seal to this side. We do have a stopper piece missing here. I'll show you what that should look like. You can see it here, and you'll probably find if you've got one of these cars, yours is missing too. Older cars tend to have these things missing as they've been messed with over time. So I hope you found this video interesting guys and helpful. If you've needed to change your fuel filter, your leak off pipe, your battery, your ECU, or get it repaired, or indeed your alternator or fan belt, this video covers everything. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, again, please do give it a thumbs up. Do go down and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our future videos, and hit that bell icon so you do get the notification. I've been Steve, this has been Knights of England. It's been a real pain in the butt doing this one, but we got it done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.